This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Harvest activities accelerate across the country at the same time river shippers are raising alarms about water levels on the Mississippi. Hello folks, thanks for joining us for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio this week. Earlier, I had the chance to head to Fargo, North Dakota to work with a group of bankers, and I took a look at the crop harvest there in Cass County, North Dakota, and things were looking pretty good, although they had seen some slowdowns. Max was on the road in Nebraska getting a harvest update.
Well, Mike, this was one of the places in the Corn Belt where they were getting it done this past week with the cooperation, generally speaking, of the weatherman here in eastern Nebraska. Farmers were rolling through the fields. Not far out of Omaha, we stopped again to talk with Mickey Gotch, who was bringing in his corn crop when we came to visit.
You know, we just got started yesterday here in Elkhorn, and things seem to be going real smoothly. We started off this morning by doing an NCGA contest check, and then now we're doing a hybrid plot. We got 18 different numbers with Pioneer, and you know, now all of a sudden the whole farm's ready to come out. So we need about 50 trucks, 5,000 combines, 200 mule wagons. You know, maybe we can get done in a couple days.
Looking back over the season, it wasn't too bad, right? You had a little bit of a hailstorm come through here early in the season.
No, it's luckily we have pivots, you know, out here. Our area is very dry, had a lot of heat. But as far as the storms, we did get a hailstorm early that, you know, we were concerned about, especially on the beans. And, you know, I'm kind of looking back at that event right now, and I think it almost helped us more than it hurt us. It caused the stems to branch out more. So I'm seeing more branching out, more pods on every single plant. So whether or not that correlates to better yields this year, I think in some way, shape, or form it might have helped us.
You might have to draw the line if David Hewlett and Randy Dowdy start to tell you to time with hailstorms.
Well, that's true, but
that might be tricky.
You know, I could probably think of some other things that maybe affected that branching out as well. It's what Randy strives for on his farm, but that's what I'm saying it is. It had to be the hailstorm, right, Max?
This early in the game, as you're still harvesting this crop, are you already thinking about what you want to do in 2023 that you might do differently?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of thought every night and every day when I'm out here on this farm, how we can improve the crop and what we need to get done after the combines are done rolling. You know, we want to get some tillage done. We want to get some cover crop done. You know, we want to have some good planning going into next year with fertility and whatnot. It looks like the strip tilling is a home run for us this year. It's definitely out-yielded our no-till check that we had by 11 bushel. So that did really well. So hats off to them soil warrior people for that.
I was going to say, you go right into the strip there.
Absolutely.
From the standpoint of things you've done wrong in the past, is there anything that stands out in your mind? You say, oh man, that was a terrible thing. I shouldn't even have tried that. Everything stands out. But no, not really. We've always done well with farming over the years. It's just, you got to learn to adapt a little bit. And every year is different out here. You know, there's so many good new technologies out there that are at our disposal. I think that we need to pay attention to everything that is there for us and see what works best on our farm. As the week began, only about a fourth of the corn and soybean crops had been harvested here in Nebraska. Growers, of course, have put a dent in that over the past few days. It is still quite dry. If you take a look at the weekly crop bulletin, it's about 80% short to very short on subsoil and topsoil moisture across Nebraska. Mike?
Thanks, Max. It does look like they're making some good progress there in Nebraska, and farmers across the country likely made progress this past week. We'll know for sure on Monday afternoon when USDA releases their next crop conditions report. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. And it's time to talk markets here on This Week in Agribusiness. As combines are running in that grain harvest, livestock producers are also keeping track of their herds. Joining us for an update on the livestock markets is Dennis Smith of Archer Financial Services. Dennis, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you, Mike.
I want to talk first about demand. This is a time of year we see demand seasonally decline. Dennis, can you give us an update? How are consumers adjusting to beef prices?
Well, overall, we're seeing a good demand. I mean, relatively good demand from a domestic perspective. We still think the consumer is flush with cash. Despite all the problems, inflation, all the talk, unemployment remains historically low. Everybody's working that wants to work, and when people are working, they want to eat, and they want to eat red meat or chicken. So I think consumer demand from a domestic standpoint remains very good.
That's good to hear, Dennis, but we are seeing those wholesale box beef values decline a little bit. Is that impacting packer margins?
It is eroding the packer margins. They remain profitable, and historically they're very good profitable. We've had historically highly profitable margins. Now they're more normal, but still in the black.
In the black. And Dennis, are the margins still big enough to incentivize increased production?
Yeah, the packers still want the cattle. The slaughter has been extremely aggressive, and they have no incentive to back the slaughter off. They are making money, and it's leading to a nice current status, we believe, in the industry.
A current status, Dennis, it has been a while in the cattle market. We've been able to talk about being consistently current in inventories. How much have carcass weights come down?
Well, the weights are actually not real light right now. In fact, the dressed weights are heavy, but the grading is the key issue, and that indicates they're pushing the cattle out of the feedlot in a very timely fashion. The carcasses are not grading choice and prime beef, and there's a shortage, and it indicates, again, it's one of the things we watch for currentness in the marketing status.
That's interesting. Dennis, as you talk about that difference between the choice and select pricing, how much has that spread widened here recently?
We watch the choice select spread, and it's historically wide. It's almost at $28 right now. Mike, on a 10-year average, that spread should be around $14. This is a real good indicator that the feedlots are really current in their marketings.
And Dennis, do you expect that to continue with the high cost of gain out there in the countryside?
Yeah, that's the other factor. Besides the profitable packer margins and killing cattle aggressively, the cost of gains are ridiculously high. Unfortunately, it looks like they're going to stay that way, and that will keep this industry current.
Dennis, how are producers managing this high cost of gain?
It's very difficult. There's just no remedy or key answer. The best way would be to buy feeders at a low level, but that's not easily done. Feeders appear to be really overpriced. The industry's had some really tough times, and a lot of areas, because of the drought, that tough time continues.
It does. Dennis, and I want to ask you, that tough time, we saw a lot of mama cows move into sale barns across drought country. Is this cattle herd going to continue to decrease in size as we go through the winter?
Oh, most definitely. We look for the industry to continue to shrink and for beef production to continue to decline. And this is something that hasn't really started yet, but when it starts, it's going to be several years.
When it starts, Dennis, that's the million-dollar question. Do you have it coming in the fourth quarter of 22?
I think it starts right now, yeah. Right now in the fourth quarter, I think you start seeing numbers decline, and I think you start seeing prices rise and production go down. That wholesale beef that you talked about could be forming a multi-year low right now.
All right, well, it's always interesting to talk price. We'll be back. We'll get some more details with Dennis Smith of Archer Financial Services here when This Week in Agribusiness returns. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. Welcome back. We're talking markets with Dennis Smith of Archer Financial Services. And Dennis, you just laid out a pretty bullish case for the cattle complex looking ahead over the next 6 months. When do those prices start to move up?
Well, I think you'll see the cash market begin to blossom, begin to rise, starting here right now in the fourth quarter. We're roughly at 142, 143 in the south, prices as high as 145, 146. In the north right now. These prices are going to be above 150, in my opinion, way before Thanksgiving. So I think you see this cash market really begin to find traction, and it'll be very surprising to most people how quickly prices advance.
Now that's very interesting, Dennis, because earlier you mentioned the incredibly high price of feeders and that feedlots are going out there and buying them. Given the fact that you expect to see live cattle prices move higher, are they going to be a good investment?
Well, I think so. I think the deferred live cattle contracts will begin to build a premium. The market or the futures lost the premium last week on the big hard break, kind of in tandem with the stock market. The key, though, was the cash market held steady during that sharp break. The deferred live cattle contracts should begin to build a premium again. That'll support the feeder cattle market.
Outside money. Dennis, we've talked a lot about hedge funds moving into commodities in the era of inflation. Are they buying live cattle contracts?
Well, we saw some liquidation last week. There's no doubt about that, with open interest down nearly every day for about 6 consecutive days. But they will come back into the market. So the money managers, the funds, are trading cattle futures. They will go with the trend. And if we get this uptrend reestablished, they will come back into the market.
All right, Dennis, I want to turn our focus to the other protein, the white meat pork out there. We did get a hogs and pigs report at the end of September. Were there any surprises to the trade?
Well, there was no surprises, but there was confirmation that there's no expansion going on in the industry. So the hog herd is shrinking. Globally, the hog herd is shrinking. They are contracting severely in Europe. We're never sure exactly what's going on in China, but we know Chinese pork producers have lost a great deal of money over the last year and a half. So globally, I have to believe that pork production is declining, not increasing.
Dennis, we saw lean hog values over $100 for 6-8 months earlier this year. Were those prices not enough to incentivize producers to expand their herds?
No, not really. There's just been too many problems. The cost of feed, prices not staying high enough for long enough, and disease issues with PRRS and PED, and the ever-ending threat of an African swine fever event. There is just no expansion in any way, shape, or form in the pork industry in the United States.
Dennis, looking at who makes up the traders in the lean hog complex, have we seen anybody get out of that business?
Well, we're a little concerned. Open interest is down about 40,000 contracts from a year ago, and it appears like the money managers, the hedge funds, are not actively trading in the hog futures market right now. Could be for several reasons, but just the impending threat of an African swine fever event could be one major reason for that.
Looking out, where do you see a bottom coming in the lean hog market? Dennis, will it be in the fourth quarter or will it be pushed out to 2023?
Well, I think the market bottomed last week with the severe downturn that we had. Futures are sharply discounted to the CME lean hog index, too much so, and I think we'll see a recovery begin. Exports is the key variable. Pork exports have been awful this year, mostly because China's not been in the market. I believe China comes back into the pork market very soon.
All right, lots of things to watch for in the world of commodities. Dennis Smith of Archer Financial Services.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
With this year's crop coming off, farmers around the country are preparing their fields for the next crop. And for some growers, that means an application of dry fertilizer. In this week's tech segment, Chad Colby talked with Brian Leone from Leone Grain and Supply about getting everything calibrated on your operation.
Brian, last week I had the opportunity to witness you calibrating your dry fertilizer spreaders. Talk a little bit about why that's important and what were you trying to accomplish during your calibration?
Well, we're just kind of getting into the start of the fertilizer season up here in north central Illinois, and we just wanted to verify that we're putting the fertilizer down where our customers and where we want to put it.
Brian, it looked to me like the technology that you were using with those pans is something that probably your dad, maybe your grandpa, and his grandpa probably did. But talk a little bit about some of the things you and Jason were really trying to accomplish. I know there's definitely an art to applying fertilizer. Talk a little bit more about what you guys were actually trying to achieve.
Well, all that high technology stuff that we were using, Chad's right. I'm sure my grandfather did use that back in the 1950s and 60s, and it's still in use today, and it's still very, very helpful. We're just trying to make sure that we've got an even spread pattern all the way across the width of the spread. And it's interesting the little changes that you can make in this stuff and what it does and how it can affect that, and the weight of the fertilizer and stuff like that.
So Brian, is it correct you can still only throw fertilizer so far? What kind of advice would you give to a farmer who maybe is curious if he's got some issues that are fertilizer related out in his field?
You're exactly right, Chad. You can only throw the dry fertilizer so far, and I guess there's probably some people that will argue with me in the trade. And I've been to a lot of the fertilizer trade shows and looking at the fanciest, the latest and greatest fertilizer spreader technology. But if there's these spinners back here, it's been my experience that you can only get it so far. There's a lot of people that advertise 90, 100-foot spread widths, and that's not something that we promote, nor do we allow our operators to spread over 80 feet. And we found times that 80 foot is even pushing it, depending on what's in the blend.
Well, it was just interesting for me, and I appreciate you giving me a call that you were calibrating machines. Brian, did you notice any variability between the three machines when you ran them?
We did. You know, New Leader's got a chart, and we do that calibration occasionally. We try to do it every year when we're getting started. But not a lot of difference, but each machine had a slightly different setting.
Brian, talk about the adjustments real quick on the back of the machine. I mean, I've run these myself. You've got two over here. Talk a little bit about what they do and what an operator might do to adjust his machine.
Well, this is basically just the gate. So if you're putting a lot of material on, you have to raise the gate up and recalibrate the monitor. But this is the spinner frame adjustment. This is the most important thing. You see it going backwards and forward, and that will drastically change the way it's spreading and where it's putting that fertilizer. So you have to make sure you have it in the right spot.
Well, one thing about it, it's neat seeing this old technology, but you know what? The fact of the matter is this is technology everybody uses, but you still got to run it correctly.
That's correct.
Calibration is so important, especially when we're looking at the cost of dry fertilizer here in 2022. Folks, stick around for more This Week in Agribusiness coming up. We're going to talk with Mike Steenhook about the very low water levels on the Mississippi. Welcome back, folks. Agriculture remains in focus in Washington, D.C. with the midterm elections weeks away and the Farm Bill coming up in the next Congress. Patrick Haggerty has a discussion from D.C. for us.
We're in the House of Representatives today with David Scott. Congressman Scott is the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. And Congressman Scott, welcome.
Good to be with you.
I know your committee's worked very hard. The Farm Bill's next year. Tell us about what has the committee done to get ready for next year's Farm Bill?
Well, first of all, we've had hearings. Our agriculture system in this country is right now the greatest in the world. Our aim is to keep it that way. We're addressing many climate changes. We're addressing ways in which to make sure we do not come up with a food shortage with all of these challenges. And if we look around the world, we're impacted by that. So we've moved to deal with one of our primary issues, which concerns what's happening over there in Russia and Ukraine. People don't know it, but Russia now controls 66% of the world's fertilizer. That is horrific for us. So one of the things that we've moved is to immediately address that issue, and we've applied resources and legislation to create our ability to produce our own fertilizer. We will never become subject to Russia with critical fertilizer.
As you know, producers always look to insurance as a risk management tool. Will the insurance title change much? Can they still count on that as a risk management tool?
Yeah, we can still count on that as a risk management tool. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because the other thing and other crisis is, let me tell you, we are losing 17,000 small family rancher farmers every single year. and we're moving drastically. This is my #1 priority, is to make sure we protect our small family farms, particularly in beef. We've had hearings on this subject. We brought in the big CEOs of the 4 top meat packers like Tyson's and all of those 4. We used to have thousands of meat packers, but now it's been consolidated.
We're down in concentration.
We've had threats of antitrust behavior, but we've got to address the front end of our food supply chain, and that is what I'm devoting to, because people don't understand. For example, we are dealing also with soil regeneration. People don't understand that the beginning of our food chain is not at the grocery store or the farm. It's in the ground. And so we have to make sure we have the nutrients there. So we have soil regeneration. We've got to make sure we keep the carpet in the ground. All of us come from the earth. That's why we call it Mother Earth. When the good Lord made you and me and our ancestors, it says he scooped down and got us from the earth. So much of our food supply begins there. So we're doing that. But going back to our 17,000 ranchers who are losing, that is intolerable. So we have put legislation in. We brought all these meat packers in. We had a tremendous hearing, and our CEOs came in. Many said I couldn't bring all the CEOs in, but it was important to hear from them. The CEOs, chief executives, kept telling everybody they're a part of the problem and the solution. And so we got them in and our ranchers, and you should have heard the stories. 17,000 farmers losing it. Many haven't made a profit in 5 years. And many of the younger generation are saying, no way, I'm going into that. So I had to move. We brought everybody in. We have a bill saving our small family rancher farms, and we built in there a 2-pronged system. First of all, you mentioned insurance. You mentioned that. We have an insurance program in there to make sure that we have, based upon a beef spread analysis, to make sure that we have a safety net in there to help farmers, small farmers, those who are maybe at 150 head of cattle. They're our source. If we don't save our small farmers, then what are we going to have there except big mega shops like at the other end of our food chain? No, we can't have that. So we have that in there, and we also have a marketing plan where we will provide money. We're working with Tom Vilsack, my friend, who's Secretary of Agriculture, to put some money in there to develop a marketing program so that our small farmers can increase their market share. And now the other thing we're doing is to help our small farmers who are our milk producers, our dairy producers. So there's so many challenges. Make sure our soil is healthy and vibrant, and make sure we protect and enhance our small family farms.
Well, Mr. Chairman, sounds like your committee's done a lot of good work ready for next year. Thank you for being with us. In Washington, D.C., Patrick Haggerty, This Week in Agribusiness.
Thank you, Patrick. It'll be interesting to see how that conversation changes post-election. Folks, stick around. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we return.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. In agriculture, of course, we talk a lot about the work the farmers do on the field to get that crop in, but the work the farmers do is built in a large part by the work done by scientists and engineers in labs creating new products and tools that farmers can use. Max has a conversation about one of those new products for us now.
A lot of new products are coming along for growers to use out there, Mike. They're continuing to try to look at the tools in the tool shed to do a better job the next season. And some growers right now are doing that as they roll through the fields and combines, formulating ideas about 2023. James Coday joins us from UPL to talk about a new product that they have. James, a new herbicide that growers had a chance to use this year, correct?
Yeah, we UPL launched a new pre-emergent herbicide called Preview 2.1 SC, as you mentioned, and really designed as a herbicide resistance fighter for the soybean market and for the soybean growers. We had the opportunity to use it this year across many acres, and the response was really good. We saw the exceptional residual control that we expected, had really good crop safety. The tank mixing, the mixing was excellent. Growers really gave us good feedback on how easy it mixed, the ease of use, and how well it looked coming out of the sprayer. So really excited about the results that we saw in this first year.
So it really hangs in there for you. It has good residual. How does it work, James?
Yeah, so it's a pre-mix. It's a 2-to-1 ratio of two herbicides that folks are familiar with, sulfentrazone and metribuzin. And so, you know, really putting it down early keeps those weeds dead and not allow them to get not get up and get going.
Some growers looked at it for burn down application. Talk a bit about that. And some, no doubt, have used that to their advantage in this growing season.
Yeah, for sure. When we think about the burn down application and really this fall application as we go into get through harvest and growers want to put down a fall application, that's where we see Preview fitting as well to help make sure that we get a good start as we go into the planting season next spring.
Things are moving along at a good pace during this harvest season, aren't they, James? Have you talked to some of the growers out there? Not only are involved in harvesting the crop already in tillage and, taking a look at that 2023 season.
Yes, for sure. And there is, I think, like you said, moving along very quickly. Growers seem to be pleased with how things are moving forward to this point that I've had the conversation. And again, when we think specifically about Preview 2.1, really set the stage for them to have a clean field throughout the year.
You folks on the UPL team stand at the ready to help growers, to answer their questions, to assist them, as I can imagine.
Of course, yeah, you can. They can reach out to us at previewherbicide.com, and of course, their local retailer as well. And so, one of the things about UPL is we do have a strong staff, a technical service team across the Midwest and into the Plains region as well. So, growers can definitely reach out to their retailer and have our folks come and visit with them.
Preview 2.1 SC, and again, that website that you share, James, is what?
Previewherbicide.com.
James Coday with UPL. Thanks for joining us this weekend, sir.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity, Max.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, it's time to take a look at the weather. Meteorologist Greg Solier joins us this week. And Greg, looking out at the Pacific Northwest, it seems that fire risk is back in play. Any relief in sight?
Not really. Maybe a little fanning of it, or maybe perhaps a couple of brief showers, but nothing widespread, nothing significant. We do not see the start of the rain and wetter season to the Pacific Northwest anytime soon. Farther south, a bit of a different story, but here it is early in the week, kind of a boundary stretched out from Big Sky Country across the Dakotas. Warmth on one side and a typical October feel, but none too much to worry about from a temperature standpoint. We've had some frost and freezes already and an end of the growing season, so no big surprise there. Sun-filled, great weather for outdoor work and still combating some of these fires in the Rogue River Basin and Willamette Valley, the Pacific Northwest. We do get a little buckling in the jet, fast-moving disturbance. The northern branch is going to race on through. The southern branch farther south will be a different story, but there may be at least a scattered affair offering of shower activity. That's going to be primarily from about the divide on eastward, a little snow on the higher peaks, and again, not much to speak of other than a drop off in temperature readings into the Pacific Northwest. Watch the directional change on those winds as well as you combat some of the fires into the Northwest. Hot last week, hot early on in the week across the central and southern valleys of California. We had a system last week that actually generated some flash flooding flooding and a couple of downpours. It still lingers here through parts of Arizona and New Mexico into West Texas cotton. Boy, that cotton is pretty crummy through Texas and in through the southeastern states because of Ian. But warm weather otherwise across the central and southern plains where that winter wheat belt needs rain, and we have some rain. Again, farther south, that system in the Pacific Northwest, a digging jet stream pattern should serve up some respectable rains to help the winter wheat newly planted across Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Then there'll be a cool down in temperature readings as well into the valleys of California and the desert Southwest.
Greg, across the northern corn belt, some farmers got a cool down this past week. Is that cooler weather here to stay?
Absolutely not. Short-lived, a little reminder, it is autumn, it is fall, and just as quickly as this frosty high pressure has moved on into the northern and eastern corn belt and built on southward, it will begin to relax. Maybe a sprinkle on the milder air return over the eastern belt, but I tell you what, great outdoor work and harvest-related activities. Here comes the south wind. You have some moisture across parts of the Dakotas, but low afternoon humidity, good moisture reduction values anticipated, and should be able to move forth with harvest operations until the middle and late portions of the week. Now, you know, it's a juggling act. We want fall moisture. You got harvest going on, and this should be about a 1/4 to 1/2 inch worth of some pretty good coverage shower activity mid to late portions of the week, moving its way into the northern through eastern corn belt locales, and a typical mid-October feel back behind that weather system into the northern plains. Again, need rain across Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Yes, the drought has worsened, that is, in many areas of the plains and western corn belt locales. Pretty quiet weather picture, including the tropics. Mild weather across the Gulf Coast. Dry time for some of those cotton fields as well, coming off Ian, with cleanup and recovery farther east and through Florida. A little bit of heat in through West Texas cotton. That system out of the Pacific Northwest drops into the southwest, and we do get some good coverage, better coverage showers and thunderstorms into Oklahoma and Texas and the south end winter wheat. Meanwhile, along and east of the Delta, high and dry weather conditions continue on there.
Greg, you mentioned Ian, that East Coast still working to recover from. Is the weather going to cooperate this week?
It should. Yeah, boy, that thing stuck around across the eastern states for a week to 10 days, and of course, a cleanup and recovery farther on south. This is a separate weather system moving in behind that strong, almost November-like cold front. You know, there's a chill in the air across the St. Lawrence River Valley, but in absence of any organized moisture, still some lingering and ongoing dryness and drought here, even in the wake of Ian. So outdoor work all ahead forward, harvest-related activities as well until the mid and more likely late portions of the week. Good coverage shower activity for the northern and western corn belt on the move with high pressure and control, and beautiful outdoor work weather across the northeast and New England. Still some ongoing fresh river flooding in central and south Florida. Of course, just an absolute horrible situation there, as well as citrus. Dry time for cotton over the mid-Atlantic region. Dry as well for the Delta region until the late portion of the week. Showers and thunderstorms increase there. High pressure over the mid-Atlantic region, and a pretty quiet, comfortable weather pattern anticipated farther south and east. By the way, the tropics remain very quiet and uneventful. A couple of systems making their way across the South Atlantic and in through parts of Central and South America. So good looking weather pattern over the southeastern states for cleanup and recovery in the wake of Ian.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
And we're back talking weather with meteorologist Greg Solier, looking out at precipitation. Greg, who's going to get what next week?
Well, good news as it applies to the winter wheat belt. Central and southern plain states area is newly sown, clamoring for some wet weather. We had it last week in the desert southwest. That and a big upper system making its way out of the Pacific West should ignite as the week wears on. Some pretty good totals here. Kansas City, St. Joe, up through some of that sandhill country of Nebraska. The fires there and points on southward. Drying out in the southwestern states, maybe a little spotty moisture into the Pacific Northwest too. Dryness and drought really has increased and worse in many areas from the Mississippi on westward. There will be some harvest delays mid to late portions of the week as you make your way into the eastern corn belt. High and dry for now over the southeastern states. We'll keep an eye on the tropics. This will not be a named feature up across the northeast and New England. Good go of it this week with about a 1/4 inch of moisture.
Let's take a look at temperatures, Greg. What are you expecting for the next week?
Still some late summertime going on here with warmth, but again, hopefully some low afternoon humidity, moisture reduction, and harvest opportunities over the eastern half of the country. A little trough across the western part, so a tendency for some below average temperature readings there. No two extremes here on either side of the ledger. We do get some wet weather back into play again. Dryness and drought versus harvest. It's the old balancing act, and so maybe some harvest delays here. Nothing out of control in the moisture department. Somewhat somewhat above average for the Corn Belt locales, southeastern states, and hopefully not named. But again, the tropics are going to stay busy late in the season across the southwest Atlantic, back to dry time in the southwest and across sections of the northeast and New England.
Greg, for the week of October 24th, do you see that cold air area spreading?
We really don't. Here's the warmth. It's kind of retrograded. We get kind of a northern branch to sweep on by. Typically, when the winds up aloft come in from the northwest, that is a drier scenario, so maybe a hint of good news with harvest in mind. We'll take a look at the precip category in just a second, but the warmth does get shoved back into the western states, a bit below average across the Gulf Coast, into the northeast and New England. This is not a cold wave weather pattern by any means, just the passage of a trough, a weather system, a typical mid to late October feel to the maps and charts. Wet weather down here, Gulf Coast drying out and plenty of opportunity for harvest to resume in the Corn Belt and back westward into the northern and central plains.
Do those warmer temps stick around for Halloween and the week after?
Yeah, nothing too spooky in the maps and charts with temperatures. Matter of fact, another eastward expansion here. Look at that. No need to put the heavy coat over the costume, hopefully. Plenty of warmth, a late October, early November style here. Just a little sliver of cooler than average weather over the southeastern states. Plenty of opportunity for harvest across the Midwest. Wet weather, good news across the west.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
In Max's Tractor Shed this weekend, not just one green tractor, 7 of them. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. It doesn't make any difference what color you're looking for. Yes, they have plenty of green and yellow ones and many other colors too. Bring yourself up to date on what they have to sell at StoreLock.com. Well, I'm featuring this weekend auger tractors here in the midst of harvest season, and they're all green, okay? Just so you know. Every one of them is a John Deere. Let's take a look at some nice looking green tractors. This is Brock's tractor, a John Deere 4430 made in 1975 with that nice grain trailer in the background. You can almost see the dealer sticker on it there from the dealership in Mattoon, Illinois back in the day. Here's Doug's John Deere 4430. Also a 1975 tractor out of North Dakota. You can see that auger stretched out of the background. Here's a 1970 John Deere 4020 diesel. Tim owns this in Missouri with a nice chrome stack on it. A 1964 John Deere 4010. Kevin in Kansas has this. Look at the rain cap. It's standing up on that muffler. That tractor was running at the time. Scott in Minnesota has this 1982 John Deere 2940. He's stirring up some dust there in southwest Minnesota, it appears. Ross in Kansas has this 1965 John Deere 3020D. And finally, yes, one more John Deere, a 1969 4020. Dane in Indiana has this. It belonged to his grandpa Don and then got out of the family for a while, and he got it back after more than a decade. Some great looking auger tractors in John Deere green this weekend. Oh, we'll have some red ones and blue ones and other colors too in the weeks ahead. Let's see what's selling, whatever color it may be, at Big Iron Auctions. Here's Mark Stock.
Well, this week on BigIron.com, we've got land that will sell in Benton County, Missouri, got land in Madison County, Nebraska, and land in Rooks County, Kansas that will sell to the highest bidder, plus a commercial property by Sedalia, Missouri. Our sister company, Sullivan Auctioneers, they've got land selling in Sullivan County, Missouri, and Scotland County, Missouri on October the 12th. Then they've got land selling in Rock Island County, Illinois, October the 14th. A lot of land hitting the market now, folks, so please go to both BigIron.com and SullivanAuctioneers.com for all the latest information. We've got some great equipment then that will sell to the highest bidder on October the 12th. Tom and Brenda Nissen, they are retiring from Allen, Nebraska. They have a John Deere tractor collection that will be selling, including a 1977 John Deere 4630. They've got a 1970 John Deere 4000. They've also got a John Deere 630, a 530, and a 730, just to name a few. There's a total of 1,256 items selling on October the 12th, and the Hay Creek Ranch Estate in Billings, Montana. They've got a Cat 926E wheel loader that will sell, and a 1979 Ford LN 800 boom truck. Max, all the reps are listing equipment that will sell in December right now. So get a hold of your Big Iron rep or your Sullivan Auctioneer rep as soon as possible.
We love getting to know the next generation of young leaders in the world of agriculture, and this week is no exception. We're talking to Branson Van Fleet. He is an Ohio FFA member, and he will be the Ohio National Officer candidate later on this year. Branson, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here and chat with you.
Branson, I believe you are the first national officer candidate to join me on this program. Tell us a little bit what the process was like to get to this level in FFA.
Of course. So this past year, my year of service as an Ohio FFA state officer ended in May when our state convention wrapped that up. And then a few weeks later, we got an email saying it was time to decide who would be Ohio's national officer candidate this fall at National Convention. And so after a lot of thought and reflection, I decided that that was something I wanted to pursue. And I notified my state staff of that. And we held an interview process for all the candidates that chose to run. And fortunately, I was selected, and I'm grateful to be here and have this opportunity.
So, Branson, the next step is you will be running against 35 other FFA members at convention. Talk about what would that year of service look like if you get selected as a national officer?
Well, the first thing I can say is it would be the opportunity of a lifetime. I would get to travel around the country and hopefully work with and inspire a lot of FFA members, and also be inspired myself and work a lot of behind the scenes with National FFA and just represent everything that the FFA emblem stands for an entire year, which is something that's crazy to think about and something I would have never imagined I'd be trying for a couple years ago.
Well, that's the thing. You've been in FFA a while now, Branson. What was it that prompted you to join the organization in the first place?
Yeah, so I practically grew up in the ag classroom, I like to tell everybody. My dad was my agricultural educator in high school when I was an FFA member back in my early days of it. And he taught at the school that I went to, obviously. So back in elementary school, I would get off the bus at the high school and go and hang out in my dad's classroom and see his FFA members at work and see all the cool things that happen in there. And I knew that I wanted to join that organization one day too. And so, of course, when I got to high school, I didn't hesitate. I signed up for it, and now here we are.
Now here we are, headed off to potentially be a national officer for the FFA. Branson Van Fleet of Ohio, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you the best.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Over the past 2 years, supply chains have been the focus of a lot of consternation throughout the markets, and it was expected that things might be starting to improve by the time we got to now. But they're not. Joining us now with a new issue for farmers to be concerned about as we look ahead to harvest is Mike Steenhook, the Executive Director of the Soy Transportation Coalition. Mike, it was just a few short weeks ago we were worried about a shutdown of the U.S. freight rail system. Now we've got concerns about water levels in the Mississippi. How low is that river?
Yeah, and the hits keep coming. It's a real concern. You know, we've had a real scarcity of precipitation, of course, throughout the course of this summer, but even it extended into the winter of last year. You know, so much of the water on the Mississippi River originally starts as a snowflake in places like Montana and feeds into the Missouri River Basin. So we have this scarcity of water, and it's really impacting the efficiency of barge transportation. You know, barge transportation, you know, the magic behind it is its ability to move a lot of heavy product long distances in an economical manner. And then when you have scarcity of water on our inland system, it really starts impeding that and chipping away that efficiency. And that's unfortunately what we're seeing right now.
Mike, what are the impacts so far of the lower water level? Are we seeing reduced loadings?
Yeah, it really has an impact on two things. Number one, channel depth and channel width. For channel depth, we're already seeing instituted draft restrictions, which means that you can't load a barge with as much freight as you normally would. So for every 1 foot of water depth reduction, you have to then load what's the equivalent of 5,000 fewer bushels per barge. And if a typical barge can easily carry 50,000 bushels, you're easily chipping away at 10% of its capacity in terms of depth. And then on channel width, because the river is narrower, you can't connect as many barges together to move as one single unit. And so south of St. Louis, you can typically see 30, 35, even 40 barges all lashed together. There's currently a maximum tow configuration of 25 barges. So that's a real significant diminishment. So when you put those two things together, reduction of channel depth, reduction of channel width, the economics of barge transportation is really much less than it normally is.
Well, with that being the case, Mike, I would imagine prices are climbing on the rivers. What are barge rates looking like?
Yeah, we're seeing 40+% increases. Depends on where you're loading that barge, but a loading, say at a facility between Minneapolis, St. Paul, and St. Louis, you're seeing a 41% increase in barge rates, because what's essentially happening is demand for barge services is exceeding the supply of it, because barge transportation is less efficient. You're going to have more rotations or turns of that barge to move a given amount of freight. And so that's what you're seeing. The inevitable result of that is increased costs, and we're expecting that to continue to move upward.
Mike, any relief in the short term?
Unfortunately, the meteorologist's crystal ball is not suggesting a lot of additional rainfall. That's really the ultimate elixir to that. So unfortunately, this is going to be a challenge that we're going to be wrestling with for the foreseeable future.
Oh boy. Well, Mike, we'll continue to watch you for updates. That's Mike Steenhook of the Soy Transportation Coalition. And folks, thanks to you for tuning in. Whether you're out there this next week harvesting your current crop or planting your next one, we hope you're safe and you'll join us next week, same time, same place, right here.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.